Hello, good morning. Welcome to this very short module on English language teaching. Approaches and Methods in Language Teaching by Jack C. Richards and Theodore S. Rogers was published very recently, in fact in 2000. The book, however, links itself to current pedagogical paradigms only indirectly and occasionally. For example, it does not discuss widely the difference between behaviorist and cognitive approaches to language learning, one of the key issues in current discussions on pedagogy. Neither does it discuss such learning theories like constructivism, social constructivism, or critical pedagogy. However, it looks at language learning, especially learning English, on the basis of several approaches and methods which are ultimately based on these approaches. It also discusses methods which were actually practiced in language teaching learning for the most part of the 20th century. The book begins with a brief history of language teaching in Europe, looking at how the approaches and methods from the 18th century were conditioned by the paradigms that developed for learning classical languages like Latin and Greek. The grammar translation method continued to be popular right into the beginning of the 20th century. In the 20th century, the developments in linguistics and psychology, as well as political thinking on teachers and learners and the learning situations, led to the introduction of new approaches and methods. The authors clearly distinguish between approach, method, and technique. According to them, an approach is a set of beliefs and principles about the nature of language and language learning. We can say that an approach is guided by philosophies or ideologies on language and learning. The various approaches described in the book, like communicative language teaching and cooperative learning, are based on such beliefs and principles. These beliefs and principles concern several issues like the relative role of the learner and the teacher in the learning process, what exactly is learning, and how it actually takes place. A method is a specific design or system based on one or more approaches to language teaching learning. It contains detailed information on the content of learning, roles of teachers and learners, and teaching procedures and techniques. If a particular method is adopted, the teachers and learners have to broadly follow its specifications and very little variation is possible when it is implemented. Techniques are particular strategies used inside the classroom or elsewhere with particular objectives. It must be noted that there are large overlaps between the methods described in the book. For example, the oral method, the direct method, and situational teaching method all emphasize the spoken language. The direct method and the silent method both underplay the role of the teacher, and so on. In general, a method will refer to the following: the general approach on which the method is based. 2. The relative roles of the teacher and the learner, whether the method is teacher-centered or learner-centered, whether varying amounts of learner autonomy can be permitted. 3. The relative emphasis on one of the two forms of language, spoken or written. 4. Whether the learner's first language ought to be used in the classroom or whether interaction is limited to the language being learned. 5. The exclusive selection of or the varying proportion of language elements to be involved in the learning teaching, that is, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, etc. 6. Procedures, learning and teaching activities, techniques and tools used in the classroom and outside, traditional grammar translation, oral practice, reinforcement by drilling, writing exercises, use of audio-visual aids and information and communication technology, etc. The authors have described each method systematically. They have first looked at the theories on language and language learning that underlie each method. They have then looked at how the method is designed. This first component of the design would be the objectives of the method, what the method seeks to achieve. Different methods have different objectives. Some would aim at fluency in speaking the language. Others would aim at reading and library skills. Yet others would aim at writing the language efficiently, etc. The second component would be a syllabus, which would have to be formulated to achieve the stated objectives. Next, the roles of the learner and the teacher will have to be clearly defined. The teaching or instructional materials will have to be identified. These may range from a simple textbook to audiovisual aids, advanced materials devised with information and communication technology, to sophisticated apps designed for language learning and are used in cyberspace. Each method also spells out the classroom procedure to be employed in the teaching learning process. At the end of the book, the authors briefly discuss what is called post methodology, or learning teaching without any of the methods described in the book. But post methodology can simply be another term for self-learning, a process by which the learners devise their own ways of language learning without the aid of established methods. Constructivist and social constructivist approaches to learning incorporates the idea of post methodology in a large way. Both presuppose a large amount of learner autonomy. What is known as critical pedagogy, formulated by educationists and philosophers like Paulo Freire, also visualizes freeing the learner from the shackles of conventional methods of learning and the cultivation of habits of critical thinking in the learners who process, analyze, and interrogate learning material during the process of learning.